evening. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to those in the room tonight and welcome to those online. You are seeing the Granada Hill Center for Spiritual Living Wednesday night discussion group. And we honor all who are on their spiritual pathway, who practice their beliefs in faith and love. Welcome, 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 everyone. Our call to service is called Lighting the Flames of Faith, and we perform this ceremony to promote the universal consciousness of life, which acknowledges that all peoples, all faith, all sentient beings come from the one great universal presence, which we call spirit. Fundamental to this truth is the unifying nature of all religious thought and experience, which we honor here today. Our presider tonight is Reverend Kathy Lyons, and as she lights the first candle, it is for the Tao, honoring the universal path of harmony and equilibrium, the natural way. We light the second candle for the shamanic traditions, honoring the beliefs and practices of all indigenous peoples, the way of primal spirituality. We light the third candle for Hinduism, honoring the path of knowledge, action, and devotion. We light the fourth candle for Judaism, honoring the ethical path of living by sacred law. We light the fifth candle for all forms of Buddhism, honoring the Four Noble Truths as the path of compassion. We light the sixth candle for all forms of Christianity, honoring the Christ consciousness as the path of love. We light the seventh candle for all forms of Islam, honoring the path of submission to the will of God as the highest calling. We light the eighth candle for the universalistic religion of Baha'i, honoring the path of unity and peace. We light the ninth candle for all forms of new thought, honoring the metaphysical path of mental healing through the practice of universal spiritual principles. We light the 10th candle for all those who are as yet unaware of the power and presence of spirit in their lives and for the space we hold for them at this center and in our hearts, as Reverend Mike would say. As Reverend Kathy lights the healing candle, please put silently into the light the names of anyone you wish to have experienced the healing flame of God's eternal love.
I'm thankful, so grateful. I'm one with the Spirit all around me. I'm thankful, so grateful. I trust in God. I surrender. I surrender. I'm one with the Spirit all around me. I surrender. I surrender. I trust in God.
Join me, please, as I speak in the I am for everyone here and online. I recognize this presence of God, this life of God, this life of the Spirit which expresses through me as all the wonderful God qualities of love, health, wealth, and creativity. And I am one with this presence of God, one with its love, health, wealth, and creativity. And so right now, I declare that this hour that we spend together is a perfect and complete idea in the mind of God, where I learn about from the living of science of mind as God as my personal self and that life of God which expresses within me. So I have that ability where I naturally experience love, health, wealth, creativity, and anything else in my life, that my life is peaceful and harmonious, and I just trust that Spirit within to always guide me and direct me to my highest good. And so I am so grateful for tonight, for creating the life that I desire, that is loving, prosperous, healthy, and creative. And I give thanks for Reverend Dr. Maureen and Reverend Nancy and Resin and everybody participating. And I give thanks that I embody and live the science of mind. And so with deep gratitude, faith, trust, and conviction, I release my word to the law. I know it is done. I know it is so. And together we say, and so it is. Good evening. I have some announcements before we get into our lively discussion. And we have practitioners on every Sunday who are available in the treatment room. Also, you can contact a practitioner, go online to CSLGH.org and find a practitioner, and they're available to either heal something in your life or just to enhance more good. And we thank everybody who participated in open mic last Wednesday. And tonight's our discussion group. And then reoccurring on Thursdays at 7 p.m., we have an AA group that holds an open book study. And you can contact Liz at 818-640-2458. And a friendly reminder, no Tai Chi class tomorrow on May 29th. And now let's go to our great discussion with Reverend Dr. Maureen and Reverend Nancy.
Thank you, Kathy. Appreciate you being here. Kathy is one of our ministers. Her specific ministry is the animal ministry here, and she does a good job because she has cats.
Yep.
And you know you can't train cats. They're independent. I have one as well. Tonight's discussion is from Living the Science of Mind, God, Your Personal Self. That's our discussion for tonight. One of the things that someone that I was working with was very upset when she heard that God is impersonal. That it answers to everyone alike in the same manner as what was intended. But she read it that she was not allowed to have a personal relationship with God. And so she didn't think she could come to the center anymore. So we had quite a discussion around this, and as I recall, I did photocopy this for her from the Living the Science of Mind because, you know, I am a drop of water in the ocean of consciousness called God. I have all the qualities of God, but I am not all of God. And so when I said to her, I said, why would you not have a personal relationship with your God self? And she said, well, what do you mean God self? I said, you have God within you. And as Ernest Holmes says that, and I've said this before probably here on Wednesday night, that the God within is the safest place to hide God because it's the last place we look. And I think that's true sometimes. We look for our answers out there. Kathy and Reverend Nancy and I were having a discussion earlier, and sometimes we look to the outward manifestation for the answers to what we really need to go within to find out about. So, Bonnie, if you'll pick up the microphone there, and you'll be the first to read. It's only 2 pages tonight. So it'll be, we'll have a rousing discussion once we're done with the reading. Actually, why don't you do 2? That would be good, yeah.
The life within you is God. Whatever is true of God is true of your life. Since your life and the life of God are not 2, but 1. The enlightened have ever proclaimed this unity of God, this oneness of man with God. For this reason, many have spoken of this life within you as both personal and impersonal. Impersonal from the standpoint that it is universal, personal from the standpoint that this universal life principle is personified in you. This life within you, being God, did not begin, and it cannot end. Hence, you are immortal and eternal. You can never be less, but must forever be more yourself, as this life within you unfolds through your experiences, through your gathering of knowledge and wisdom. Evolution is the drawing out of the God principle already latent within you. It is this God principle within you which Jesus referred to when he said, "Before Abraham was, I am." And when he said to the one who passed from the life with him, "Today shalt thou be with me in paradise."
The God that is within you is truth, beauty, harmony, and wholeness. Every apparent imperfection from which you suffer is a result of ignorance. Because ignorance of the law excuses no one from its effects, it follows that the very power which has bound you, rightly understood and properly used, will produce freedom. The God within you is a unity and not a duality. This unity is changeless, forever revealing itself to each. This is why the God who is already within, even though he is harmonious and perfect, has ever appeared as the God we believe in. We might say that the God within, being infinite, appears to each one of us as the God who is believed in. And we worship the God whom we believe in rather than the God who is.
But there is nothing wrong about this, since the God who is believed in is at times some part of the God who is. Therefore, whatever God you believe in, provided you believe this God is already in you, must respond to you at the level of your belief. This is why it is done unto each of us as we believe. The principle is infallible. The practice is what we make it. There is a great difference in believing God to be within you or outside you. For if God is outside you, how are you going to reach this God who, not being some part of you, must be separated from you? How can you hope to unite things which are different from each other? But the God who is already within you, being forever perfect and complete, needs no reunion with anyone, and you need no reunion with this God, because this God already is your every act, every thought, every movement, in your every plan, purpose, and performance.
The God within you creates every circumstance, situation you have ever experienced. You have called these circumstances and situations things in themselves, but they have never been. They have always been the fruition of your thought, and your thought has been dominated by your belief in God ever since you have had self-conscious life. Ever since you have had self-conscious thought, you have, by your use of the law of liberty, created bondage. Not that bondage really existed, but the possibility of using freedom in a limited way existed. You really never bound freedom. You merely use it in a restricted way. The restriction was not in the principle, but in your use of it. Oops, where'd I leave off? Okay. There is a difference whether you believe in actual limitations or merely a restricted use of freedom. If limitations were a thing in itself, you could not change it. But since it is only an outline of experience, Why not use your imagination to enlarge that experience? When you do this, you will find that the life principle within you responds just as quickly to a broader outline. The old outline was imaginary only, never real. It was like the horizon where the earth and the sky appear to meet. As we travel toward this apparent dead end, we find that it disappears. Whatever you mentally see and spiritually comprehend, you may objectively experience. For the God within you is not limited to any one experience. It is the creator of all experience.
Well, isn't that good news?
I was thinking that this is a lot like what we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks in our treatment class. But I am really curious because I heard what Maureen said, and I think she gave an excellent introduction to this, that people have different perceptions of this. I would like to hear from y'all how did this affect you as far as your belief? Is it in opposite, or is it almost there, or do you really believe what you just read?
You can start.
I really believe what I just read. I believe that I've always believed that God has been within me, and I feel it, and I know that Spirit is there. I feel it running through me sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes. There's times where I do feel disconnected, and I need to get my head together, I guess, my thinking together. But now that I'm older, I feel I have a better connection to my God.
So I like that you said you feel disconnected. You didn't say that I am disconnected.
You just feel.
You felt like you were disconnected. Ernest Holmes says, he said, if we abandon God in our hour of need, have we ever really known God at all? And what you just said is a perfect example of knowing that you know that God is always within us. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we could try to circumvent it a little bit, but that God is there the minute we sit down and get quiet enough to listen to whatever needs to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And I think when I feel disconnected, it's because I'm not being quiet enough to listen.
Yeah.
I think sometimes I get too much going on, and I am not paying attention.
Right.
But I do pay more attention lately.
Yes. So, Bonnie, how about you?
I feel God. I can't talk. No, I feel that God is in me.
Yeah.
And I feel that I'm with God, and that I experience through Him.
Yeah. Good.
I always related to the concept of being God within and being an expression of God. The idea of some God up there, we've been up to space. I don't see anything up there. So that idea that it's some entity like a man in the sky, I never related to that. I like more the idea of the spirit within that expresses through me. Every so often, if I get into kind of a pickle, I guess you'd say, sometimes I'll start saying, oh God, please, or something, but then I'll get back to center and do a regular spiritual mind treatment. Because I used to try that other thing when I was a kid. Oh God, if you get me out of this, I'll never ask for anything again. And so I like the way this concept of God. It's something I can believe in, and the fact I've been in this teaching so long, using these principles, and they work. It proved itself to me.
So tell us when did you first find the science of mind?
Well, I got an exposure to it when I was about 10 years old. I had a playmate. I grew up in North Hollywood who belonged to the North Hollywood Church. So I did go to Sunday school there a few times. I don't remember the lesson, but then maybe when I was in my late 30s and looking for a spiritual path, something must have planted a seed, because that's where I ended up coming back to. So I always tell people, who teach Sunday school here with the kids, you never know, somebody's going to bring some friend to Sunday school and they'll become a practitioner and a minister. You don't know.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. Rose.
Yeah, this was a good reading. And this line here, ever since you have had self-conscious thought, you have, by your use of the law of liberty, created bondage. For me, it's been a real evolution, because when my parents were Lutheran and Catholic, and so I went to Catholic church mostly, and followed that dogma, and I always looked up to the sky for God, and I was looking for God up there. In fact, when I was like 4 years old, I was laying in the grass and just looking up at the sky and clouds, and I literally saw God in a cloud sitting up there in the sky, and I was just marveled by that. I just thought, wow, there he is. I never associated him with being within me until much later in life, where I started to learn about science of mind, and then I really started to feel God and I are one. And that's one of my mantras. I kind of repeat that to myself quite often. God and I are one. And that may be a little presumptuous or something, but I really feel that. I feel like we are the same thing. We all are God.
So tell us a little bit about your history with the science of mind, or with metaphysics, I guess.
Well, in college, back in the 70s, 80s, I just got into alternative thinking, and I started reading different philosophers. I never heard of Ernest Holmes or Emma Curtis. I would walk past the Christian Science reading rooms, and I never went in. I just didn't know what they were. And I just did my own reading, my own exploring, and little by little, I just began to feel that is the truth, that we have to all be of one source. And then when I came across this church and saw the formal education here, I said, oh, bingo. Other people think the same way. Hallelujah. So it's been an evolution for me. At times, I felt God was without, and now I really, more and more, I feel he's within.
Sometimes though, when you run into certain people whose behavior is inconsistent with their perfection, it's like looking at them and saying, okay, God, I know you're in there somewhere, but it's a damn fine disguise that you're presenting at this moment. And it's an interesting thing as an observation of that, observing someone's behavior and not observing the person as being somehow deficient or bad or unlike what we think they should be sometimes. And we can be the observer as we step back from that person and see, for most of us, it's about separating the person and the behavior. You learn that when you have children, and you learn it really fast, really early. My son behaving badly was not behaving badly because he was a bad kid. It was just because he was Curious. His sister used to call him Curious George. Curious Nathan, yeah. Thank you. Bonnie, come in to the circle, Rosalie. No, you're good there.
This is really difficult to think straight about this. I have, since I was a little kid, had lots of seeing this is spiritual. I'm something here. I'm not just these two people's kid. And I remember when I was a child, I pondered death to the point that I saw myself dying, and I didn't. And there was this feeling of, you are just some element that's here among all of this, and it just continues if you go out of this machinery. At this time in my life, I have really gone through what we call the dark night of the soul. I've just been, it's like, where did all of that go? How I thought, the meditation, the study, dismantling how I believe, putting in new beliefs. It's been really a trudge. And I'm on the backside of that now. I think I've gone over the hill. And this makes me think of a wonderful novel, memoir. He's a priest, and one of his flock, the baby dies because a boulder falls into the convertible. And he falls, he's their priest, and he can't think of anything to say. Why would God do this? He ends up going off to a cabin for priests who are falling apart. And he lives there, and the book is his thoughts and how he deals with that. It's really comforting to think about this story that I read. At one point, a bat gets in the cabin, and he finds a shotgun, and in his rage and discontent, he shoots up the cabin. He has to spend a week fixing it. And then he goes out on the lake on a boat one more time, and it all just turned around. And he saw God on the lake with this thought, and just, I don't have to understand why that happened. This is God, I'm out here. I am God on this boat. And the lake is God too. And maybe I should go out on boats. This is really powerful for me. It's really powerful.
There's more to it in the next 2 times that we meet. You'll get more in depth with the next 2 lessons that come after this. Rosalie, we're talking about what we've read and how we feel about this description of God as opposed to the white-bearded guy in the sky God that we might have grown up with. Do you have some idea of what you'd like to share about that?
I always think, God is,
Wait.
for me, what I come back to again and again is things like God is love, or God is truth. And, then I look inside of myself for that truth, or the love. That's
Okay.
what identity
I like that.
Yeah.
I'm glad that y'all always share that, the different experiences, because I think that each person has to arrive at their own understanding. And when I was looking at this, and the life that is within us is God, it seems easy for us to sprout that that there's the oneness of life, and that oneness is now being demonstrated with the science now. And when I think about that, it kind of helps me understand how I went through an evolution experience, kind of like Mary. How I saw God when I was younger and how I see God now is different in the sense that when I was young, I just couldn't understand. I was in a Methodist church, and I couldn't understand how they kept saying it was God and he was powerful. And then they had all this other stuff that God created. I said, why did God create a devil? That seems stupid. My family did not appreciate that. And then they told us we had to be baptized, and I kept thinking, water, you take a bath every week. How you think water's going to wash anything away if you bath? So.
She still does that with her family.
I really did. I really did not. I was forever questioning them and how that could exist. And it was really interesting. And as Maureen said, when I walked in that church and heard these people talk, I said, finally, somebody that thinks like I do. Mm-hmm. This was how I felt when I walked into the Science of Mind. And it's really interesting. So back then, I still felt that there was this and then that. But recently, it just seems like the evolution of my thinking, but as it goes along, according to the experience, my definition keeps evolving. And that evolution, it seems like at first I was saying, oh God, and I got to go in and get in touch with this God. But then I began to realize that I'm already saying that everything God is on and everything came out of God. How can I have anything, even the finger, the thought, the paper, and all this stuff has to be part of the divine presence. And then I look at the trees, and all of this is a part of the spiritual presence of light. So it made me start backing off, and as I was judging things out there, I had to take another look at the life of the experience and how I was viewing things and the things that were coming into my life. Because when I think about the principles that everything is spirit, how I am experiencing it is coming out of me. And that's where I am right now. So how I'm looking at this and saying, this is coming out of me, and this is coming from my own experience. So but knowing that everything is God and that my life is God, I feel safe doing that now. Before it was just, no, I can't go there. But now I'm comfortable seeing everything out there. What does it mean? You know, what is the meaning that I have placed into it? Mm-hmm. And how am I experiencing it? Because everything in my life is coming out of this oneness of being.
So I was reading last week about the astronaut who was stuck up in space on the space station for all those weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks.
The two astronauts?
No, it was only one astronaut who was giving a report on what he experienced while he was up there. Now, Edgar Mitchell had a spiritual experience when he was up there some 40 years ago. And he created the Institute of Noetic Sciences out of his experience in space. He never went back into space, but he created this whole experience. And I rejected some of their premises because most of them were superior intellects who belonged to this organization. But as I've shared with Reverend Nancy, I left because they were trying to intellectualize spirit. And I wanted them to spiritualize the intellect. So I left. But this man, whose name escapes me, I saved the article, so I should know his name, because he spoke to how his life is forever changed from his experience being in space, because just the very concept of looking out the window and seeing the earth. And he talked about this thin veil that surrounded the whole earth. Did you read the same thing? Yes, about this thin veil. And he said he realized, what we have such a capacity for believing in something greater than we are, because the veil, and Ernest Holmes talked about the veil being very thin in his last talk that he gave at the Whittier Church of Religious Science. He said the veil is very thin between heaven and earth, between life, or between birth and death. And this astronaut talked about the veil that was surrounding planet Earth, and it was almost like there was this protective covering around Earth, and he was musing on that a little bit. I'm not doing him justice in what he actually said, but in the paragraph on the first page at the very bottom where it says the God within us is a unity and not a duality. But in the human experience, we live in the pairs of opposites, which is the duality of life, right? But in spirit, there is only unity. And this unity is changeless, forever revealing itself to each one of us. So we are as much of God now as we're ever going to be. Mm-hmm. Isn't that the truth? Yes. We're as much of God as we're ever going to be. But our awareness of how much that is continues to grow and to grow and to grow. And many of us are being challenged currently by some of the things that are going on in the world and even in our own country right now. And, excuse me. I see that nothing can defile the God presence within us. Our thinking gets skewed sometimes. We feel maybe less connected to spirit at some points than we think we should be. Nothing that we can say can beat us up more than what we say to ourselves. Nothing that somebody else can say to us can beat us up more than we can beat ourselves up sometimes. Oh, I shouldn't think that way. I shouldn't feel that way. Well, wait a minute. It's like Eckhart Tolle says in A New Earth. Feel the feeling and then investigate it. Look at it and see how it aligns with what you believe to be about your God presence within you. Well, it's about self-examination on a daily basis, I think. Mm-hmm. We don't get to understand the law of liberty without understanding bondage. He speaks to that in here. There's the pairs of opposites in the human experience are there for us to take notice of them and say, oh, well, my thinking was off. There I am. Now I need to do something about what I'm thinking about. And it's as simple as that. Use the microphone, please. Rosalie has it.
Thank you. So I have a question. When there's a challenge presented in my life, that is, I have to work really hard with that. And I just wondered how other people handle that. I've done some reading and stuff, and one thing I read recently said, make friends with that challenge, invite it in, sit with it, have a cup of tea, talk to it, have a conversation, and befriend it. And that's something I've been practicing, but I just wondered, how do other people meet the challenges?
Well, Reverend Nancy's going to tell you how they do.
Now, you know what? This paragraph, the third paragraph down, where it tells you what God is that God that is within you, truth, beauty, harmony, and wholeness, every apparent imperfection from which you suffer is a result of ignorance, because ignorance of the law excuses no one from its effect.
Yeah.
It follows that the very power which bounds you, rightly understood and properly used, will produce freedom.
The rightly understood and properly used is in italics for a reason.
And I think that what you're talking about is probably something that we all have dealt with. And I like Beckwith's take on it, Michael Beckwith from Agape. We may look at it and say, what's trying to emerge from me out of this particular experience? It's not that you ignore the experience. You try to look at what is trying to emerge, what truth, what understanding, and what needs to try. But bathing in it, no. Wallowing in it, no. I think that if we look at each thing and realize that it has come forth because of some way our thinking, our pattern, our lack of thinking sometimes has showed up. But when it does show up, if we look for what can I learn from this, what can I gain from it, and go forward from that point, I think that the issue itself stays a little less, and you get better and better at walking away from it when you are willing to surrender. Maureen just gave us a good example of what that means, of surrendering to the idea of the truth that is coming out of the experience. And when you surrender to it, you find that a lot of the difficulty and the challenge of it drops away.
Surrender or understand it?
Surrender,
Okay, wait a minute.
or
First of all, let's switch gears for a second. Instead of calling it a challenge, David Hawkins' book, Power versus Force, force is a negative, power is a positive, okay? And he uses this way of explaining how words have an effect on us. When we call it a challenge, it becomes a challenge. But if we call it an opportunity, like Nancy was saying, then it has a whole different meaning for us. What is it, as she said just now, what is it I'm supposed to learn from this? You know, no one did anything to us. When we say we have a challenge in life, it's because, you know, confusion, irritation, frustration, they're all words that point us in the direction of going within to find the answers. And it's simple on so many levels, but it's not always easy to do, especially when you're up to your knees in alligators sometimes, you know? Or it feels like we're up and Eckhart Tolle, I can't imagine that anybody hasn't read A New Earth. It's very dry in the first 2 or 3 chapters, but then when he gets going in the third, maybe the 4th chapter, the 5th chapter, where he begins to talk about how we should never put I am in front of anything we don't want to experience. Like saying I am tired, instead of saying I feel weary. I feel weary has a beginning and an end. But I am tired is a lifetime experience. My mom, for her whole life, she spoke to I am tired, I am tired. And it was almost our cue, do not bother her, do not say anything to her, do not ask her to do anything. And I know that may sound sort of frivolous on the surface, but I am angry is a lifetime experience. I feel angry. And then investigate it, as Eckhart Tolle says in his book. I can't reiterate that enough.
you know, it is important that you read that first sentence, that God within you is truth,
Beauty,
beauty,
harmony,
harmony, and wholeness.
and wholeness.
That is what the truth that you are knowing.
What's
And-
true is you're feeling a challenge right now.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And so you can move forward. You have the wisdom and the energy, and as you begin to answer this question, things last a little longer, shorter and shorter. And as Maureen said, you keep growing in that awareness to where you don't stay in them. You might start off staying them in for weeks, and then you're doing it for days, and then you're doing it maybe even hours.
So my favorite turn of phrase for that is the lows get higher, or shorter duration, and less frequency. We have a certain level of status quo that we try to align with every day. Nobody wakes up in the morning and say, boy, I'm going to have a miserable day. We don't set an intention for that. And as Reverend Nancy's heard me say ad nauseum, intention is everything. I intend to have a superlative day. Ernest Holmes says, always expect the best.
Mm-hmm.
That's if we wake up with that idea in mind, we're pretty much, thought precedes things. So, yes, use the microphone.
I was gonna say, I remember what you had said in one of your talks, and you said you can experience it, but you just can't live there.
Yeah.
And that just resonated with me, and
Yeah.
that really helps me a lot by hearing you say that,
Yeah.
because it just reminds me that yes, I'm upset, I'm experiencing some discomfort, but I cannot stay there.
Yeah, for
So,
sure.
And
Does anyone here even want to stay there? When you're in it. And all you can think about is, I need to talk to Nancy to get out of this. I think when we reach out, talking dissipates the negative energy of what's going on in life. And as we talked to Nancy about yourself, you can't quite about problems. So not about anything of a problematic nature. But then somebody, you walk around and you look at somebody and say, how are you doing? And they say, fine. And I want to say, well, you should tell your face, because you don't look fine. And then I want to investigate, well, what's really going on here, And then you walk away and you think, I could have handled that better than I did, right? I mean, there's that to think about, sometimes we're just bombarded sometimes from all directions. And, religious scientists are notoriously terrible about, you used to be able to say, as a practitioner, you can die, but you can't get sick. It's a shame to get sick, we're shamed when we get sick, but that's not true anymore. We all need to have somebody to talk to. Okay, what's next here on the agenda? Gosh, how did the time go so fast?
Oh, it's just almost to the end. I would think about
Rosalie wants to say something, I
Oh,
think.
yes, go ahead.
Well, I was, considering the health challenges that some of us go through, and then that health challenge sometimes brings you to the place where I don't know if I'm going to make it, or if I'm going to live, or I'm going to die, or whatever that health challenge is. And, sometimes what has to happen is that you have to change your thinking, and then your health challenge changes
Accordingly, yeah,
But anyway, that's what I think we're trying to talk about here.
yeah,
Because it's really easy to find something that's challenging you, especially if it's related to a health challenge.
Mhm.
And you think that there's nothing you can do about it, and then if your mind shifts and your energy shifts, you start thinking, well, this is, yes, I don't know how to organize this, or I don't know how to do that, but if I allow.
That's what practitioners are for. When I don't know how to do something, I call somebody, and I have had a prayer partner for years. And
Me
we don't
too.
call one another all the time, but I know sometimes it's just leaving a message on our machine, and I'm over it.
Yeah,
I'm
understand.
over it. Somebody else is going to take it on for me. Yeah.
That's what's happening.
Reverend Pamela Gagan says that practitioners are there for us to borrow their consciousness when we don't have the consciousness that we
right.
need to move forward. Yeah.
And sometimes that consciousness gets put into places that we think it's gonna, it's actually real. For instance, I've looked at many translations of the Lord's Prayer now, and none of them say, deliver us from evil. None of them, only that one verse, one copy that uses that word. No other translation I've ever found uses that word.
Next time we come, I'll bring you the metaphysical, the Aramaic interpretation of the Lord's Prayer.
I've probably
And
read it.
you probably have already seen it, but it is quite different than Our Father who art in heaven, money be thy name. No, that's not that. That's not that.
Yeah.
You know what? You got a minute. I'm going to read this paragraph.
Okay, go.
This one I think is significant for all of us. The God within you creates every circumstances and situation you have ever experienced. You have called these circumstances and situations things in themselves, but they have never been. They have always been the fruition of your thought, and your thought has been dominated by your belief in God ever since you have had a self-conscious life. Mm-hmm. It's to me that this is so powerful because we somehow don't want to recognize that we created something because it's not good. I mean, we judging it as not good. But the thing that is sweet is that when you said, if I created this, then I can create that.
That's right.
Honor the power, but no matter what the situation, honor the power that you have to bring it into expression. And in that honoring, you can take steps into a different direction.
For sure.
Because honoring the power of who and what we are is what gives us the ability to step into, the life that we want. So, I'm saying that from the places I've learned that myself, that not get off my case, stop judging it, and go and look for where I want to be. I look at how I want it to be. And
So as an editor proofreader, that paragraph that you just read, when it
Oh,
says,
gosh.
it says, with the last line that they have always been the fruition of our thought, and our thought has been dominated by our belief in God ever since we have had self-conscious life. And self-conscious meaning, in today's meaning, psychologically is very different. And I would have put a capital S on that self-conscious, because he's talking about being aware of the power and presence of God within us, right? And whoever transcribed this, I'll blame it on that person. How's that? Okay. Whoever transcribed this doesn't put a capital S on self-conscious. It doesn't mean to be, oh my God, I'm so sorry that I did that. Oh my God, I'm sorry I said that by mistake. I'm sorry. That's being really the ego self-conscious, okay? He's talking about self-conscious as awareness of the power and presence of God within us. And, you know, I thought about this when I first read that when we were sitting in the office, and I thought, why I edited Creative Thought magazine for 8.5 years. Cynthia would never have let this go by the wayside without a capital S on self-conscious. Yeah, there's quite a difference to the psychological meaning for sure, eh? Yeah. Oh, I'm speaking Canadian. Eh? I am a Canadian. Sometimes it shows up. Yeah, Nancy, that's one of my favorite paragraphs in the whole essay. Any last thoughts? You have 1 minute each. Oh, microphone.
Oh, I just really, this really resonated with
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
And it's funny how I just read it right before I came here. And I'm just sitting here shaking my head going, because I really, yeah, I got it.
Well, the next 2 times we meet, they're as juicy as this one is, and then some,
Yeah.
and then some. I'm glad you picked this.
Anybody?
Anybody else have a last thought? Yes? No? We got 4 minutes. So final thoughts, Reverend Nancy?
To know, it seems like the biggest journey that we have talked about tonight is to recognize and understand that the spiritual presence of life is we are walking examples of it. Each and every person around us is a walking example of it. But how we interpret it and how we perceive it seems to be where our difficulties and challenges show up for us. And a lot of it, I feel, for me, has been that I wasn't paying attention to my thought patterns until recently I began to see that it's my thought patterns that I need to, and my belief systems, to become more conscious of them, to be more aware of how and when I see something, I have to check, what was my belief about that?
Yeah.
Yeah. What can I do? How can I shift it? And the biggest thing I think that I got out of the life within you is the fact to know and understand that this life spirit is everything that's in existence. This is the oneness. This is talking about the oneness.
He does admonish us in the very last paragraph where he says, whatever we mentally see and spiritually comprehend, you may objectively experience.
Oh.
You know, so that the responsibility is up to each one of
Yes,
us.
yes.
You know, he's not putting it out there for, you know, when he talks about unity, he's talking about there is no such thing as a God for good and a God for evil. So, you know, we're the ones who make that stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
So, Nancy, you have 2 minutes and 30 seconds to do a
Prayer.
closing treatment.
Do a closing treatment.
Yes,
And
yes,
one of
please.
the closing treatment the aspects of I wanted to say here is that we have to be all right being where we are.
Yeah.
It's all right. It doesn't matter where you are. It's all right.
Yeah.
Because spirit is right there.
Yeah.
And as we go forth from this experience, if we take with us the recognition and understanding, be grateful to know and understand that it's all right to be where we are, and to really embrace the idea that the life and experience that is being expressed in through us and everyone around us is that divine presence coming into manifestation, and that we have the ability to shift our experience, our perception of being, and we embrace it with all our might, that the divine presence of who and what we are is what we are utilizing and bringing forth as our thought and belief system, knowing that it has the power to change our experience of being, to the way we are, what we embrace, what we know and understand, this wholeness of being, and this harmony of being, and this love and joy of life itself is within our reach as we open ourselves up to it. And as we go from this experience, this is the nugget of awareness that we take with us in an expanded way. We allow ourselves to understand who and what we are as we think about what we are designed to experience. And we put more of our energy towards that greater good of manifesting our heart's desire of love, joy, peace, and harmony. And we let that law of the universe, that divine presence that is the creative energy bringing things into manifestation according to that perception and belief system. We let it bring the desires of our heart into manifestation. We trust it and know that because we have embraced this concept of love, joy, and peace, our lives will beginning to show it moment by moment. Every step we take, every thought we think, the divine love of the universe flows into manifestation. So with this joy and this appreciation as the heart of our whole being, we let it be so as we join together in saying,
And so it is. Thank you all for being here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank y'all.